Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the place where we take these huge stacks of complicated research. We're talking social psychology, ancient philosophy, modern neuroscience, and we really try to deliver the foundational architecture of knowledge right to you.
And today we're undertaking a really deep dive into the very engine room of belief.
The engine room, I like that.
It's not so much what people believe, but how they believe. And maybe more importantly, how they stop believing one thing.
And start believing something else.
Exactly. Our core mission here is to investigate the fundamental structure of how the human mind acquires what you might call true knowledge. And we're going to be focusing on a deeply counterintuitive and often avoided subject. The surprising, and I would argue absolutely necessary, role of psychological discomfort.
Discomfort.
Oh,
Okay,
no.
that's the central tension we're trying to resolve today. And it really cuts across every field, doesn't it? From politics to, I don't know, personal growth.
It's everywhere.
Why is it so profoundly difficult to change your mind, even when you're faced with overwhelming facts or, contradictory evidence or just clear logical failures?
Right.
You'd think the human system would be designed for optimization, Like it would automatically update itself like a piece of software. But we know empirically that's not the case. We seem almost hardwired to resist being corrected.
And that's why we're performing what we're calling a structural analysis today. We're stripping away all the rhetorical flourishes, all the context, to find the universal mechanism.
Okay.
The mechanism that governs how we reconcile our internal subjective thoughts with what's happening in external objective reality.
Hmm?
The core problem we are wrestling with is it's structural.
So frame that problem for us. What's the central question?
The question is, how can an individual move from a deeply ingrained, emotionally comfortable state of psychological inconsistency, what psychologists call dissonance or bias, towards a state of rigorous logical consistency and ultimately true knowledge?
Especially when, as you said, we're often facing social structures that seem to reward, intellectual complacency. It's easier not to rock the boat.
It's much easier.
Yay.
And the sources suggest a unified, if frankly brutally difficult solution. This is what we're calling the engine of our deep dive.
Okay, let's hear it. The engine.
It's the recognition and the explicit acknowledgement of one's own first-order ignorance.
First-order ignorance. That sounds like Socrates.
It is. It's what Socrates called his small detail. That recognition, coupled with intellectual humility, provides the necessary discomfort and the motivation to engage in these challenging dialogical reasoning processes.
Like the Socratic method.
Exactly, which is the only thing that can really achieve logical consistency. So discomfort, in this model, it's not a failure state. It's the necessary fuel for intellectual growth.
It's the fuel. Wow. And the stakes here, they're incredibly high, right? Personally and socially.
They are. If we fail to master this transition, if we can't use that psychological discomfort productively, we risk perpetuating our own internal psychological dysfunction. We maintain what we're going to define later as stubborn ignorance.
And that has ripple effects.
Huge ripple effects. We can end up reinforcing social injustices because we never challenge the foundational assumptions that underpin power dynamics and arguments.
And you mentioned something else, something about mental health.
Yes, we'll also see some compelling evidence today that this kind of relentless intellectual rigor, when it's applied incorrectly or in, say, toxic environments, can actually foster serious mental health crises.
Where?
In the very environments dedicated to the pursuit of logic, like professional education, law schools specifically.
It sounds like we need to learn how to love the feeling of being wrong. Okay, let's unpack this core struggle. Our foundational analysis seems to be organized around two opposing mental states, two really distinct modes of thinking.
That's right.
On one hand, you have the instinctive, automatic drive for comfort and internal consistency. And on the other, the difficult analytical path toward critical truth. This is our foundational binary.
It is. And we should probably begin with side one,
Yep.
that deep, automatic drive for internal consistency and comfort.
Okay.
This whole domain is dominated by a concept called cognitive dissonance, or CD. It was a theory proposed by Leon Festinger back in the mid-1950s.
And the basic idea is what?
The basic premise is that human beings are, at a fundamental level, motivated by a psychological need to maintain internal consistency. We need it to function mentally and to adapt in the real world.
And CD, cognitive dissonance, is that that jolt, that feeling of negative affect, as the research calls it.
That's it. It's triggered when an action you take or an idea you have is inconsistent with another belief you hold really strongly.
Or when you're just exposed to information that completely violates your internal framework. It's that gut feeling of wrongness.
A gut feeling of wrongness is a great way to put it. And we're hardwired to reduce that psychological pressure as quickly as we can.
Can you give us a classic example?
Sure. If you hold two conflicting beliefs, say, I am a good, healthy person, and at the same time, I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, that contradiction generates measurable internal stress.
The discomfort.
Precisely.
Right.
The discomfort is triggered by beliefs clashing with new information, or by having to conceptually resolve something that has conflicting sides. The individual's immediate instinctive psychological reaction is to reduce that discomfort and restore some kind of equilibrium.
Because we crave consistency. Inconsistency is literally painful.
It's psychologically painful. And what's so fascinating here is that the mind almost always chooses the path of least resistance.
Right. So instead of doing the hard work, like fundamentally restructuring a core belief,
Like quitting smoking, for example.
or admitting a deeply held political position is based on a false premise. Instead of that, we employ these, automatic strategies, a kind of mental sleight of hand to reduce the dissonance.
Exactly. We choose comfort over the challenge.
So what are the key automatic reduction techniques detailed in the sources? What's the first one?
The first, and arguably the most common, is rationalization.
Okay, rationalizing. We all do that.
We do. It's the process of adding new cognitive parts, new beliefs or justifications to justify a stressful or inconsistent behavior. A classic example from the research involves something called the effort justification paradigm.
Effort justification. Unpack that.
It's simple. If you spend a significant amount of time or money or effort to acquire something, you tend to increase your valuation of that thing to justify the cost.
Even if the result is kind of mediocre.
Especially if the result is mediocre.
So if I buy an incredibly expensive ticket to a concert that turns out to be just, okay, instead of admitting I wasted hundreds of dollars, my brain automatically increases my internal rating of the concert's quality.
Yes. You convince yourself it was a deeply meaningful experience.
Right, rather than just admitting I was wrong, I made a bad call.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are adding the belief the experience was valuable to bridge that painful gap between I spent a fortune and the result was underwhelming.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second technique?
A second and highly relevant one, especially in our modern media landscape, is selective exposure and selective perception.
The bubble.
Pretty much. It's the conscious or unconscious tendency to actively choose media, news, or messages that fit with your existing beliefs.
While proactively avoiding any information that challenges or contradicts those attitudes.
Yes, the research is clear on this. Consumers are actively selecting attitude-consistent information and avoiding attitude-challenging information.
But why?
Because choosing something in opposition to how you feel or what you believe will increase your cognitive dissonance. It's uncomfortable. Think about how difficult it is to intentionally sit down and watch a news channel or read a publication that represents the polar opposite of your political worldview.
It's viscerally unpleasant.
That mental engagement creates dissonance, and the easiest reduction strategy is simply to look away, change the channel, close the tab.
And I guess confirmation bias is really just an extension of this, isn't it?
It is. We aren't just seeking information that supports us, we are actively structuring our lives to avoid anything that might increase the magnitude of that dissonance.
The early thinkers on this, like Festinger, they saw this immediately.
They did. Festinger described someone who was confronted with contradictory evidence. He said, tell him you disagree, and he turns away. Show him facts or figures, and he questions your sources. Appeal to logic, and he fails to see your point.
That person is actively engaged in self-protection.
Not truth-seeking. And this impulse to self-protect is so powerful, it can lead to choices that seem, on the surface, utterly counterintuitive, but they provide psychological relief.
And the sources give us a really specific and, to be honest, a kind of heartbreaking example of this.
They do. It's from a 1992 study involving lonely elderly residents in a retirement home.
Yeah, this study is so illuminating because it strips away all the complex political beliefs and just gets down to basic emotional states. So in this study, the residents who were identified as the loneliest,
The ones without family or frequent visitors.
they were shown two types of documentaries. One featured a very happy, successful elderly person full of life and connection, and the other featured an unhappy, lonely elderly person.
And what stood out was their preference. The lonely residents indicated they preferred the media featuring the unhappy, lonely person.
Over the happy, successful one.
Yes. And on the surface, that choice seems almost perverse. Why wouldn't you want to watch something inspirational or uplifting?
But the mind is choosing comfort. If the lonely resident watched the happy, successful person, it would generate a profound state of cognitive
A
dissonance.
huge clash.
I am lonely and unhappy, juxtaposed with, it is possible for people my age to be happy and successful. That internal conflict is it's too painful.
So it's far more comfortable, far less dissonant, to watch a movie about a character who mirrors their own reality, unhappy and lonely.
Because it affirms their current emotional state. It reduces the clash and provides immediate psychological equilibrium.
It's a fascinating and sad demonstration of the principle. This automatic, comfort-seeking drive aligns perfectly with what cognitive science calls type 1 processing.
Type 1. This is the fast, intuitive thinking we hear so much about.
It's automatic, it's quick, and most importantly, it's cognitively economical. It relies heavily on mental shortcuts or heuristics that are either evolutionarily wired or experientially established. We use type 1 for rapid, non-critical judgments all day long.
And the trade-off is efficiency for accuracy. The speed and economy of type 1 thinking, while it's necessary for surviving a complex world, it tends to produce judgment biases in adults.
It does. It sacrifices logical rigor for comfort and for speed.
So we're optimizing for mental energy, not for objective truth.
Exactly. Type 1 is the status quo preservation system. So now let's look at side 2.
The other side of our binary.
The deliberate, painful process that attempts to override type 1. This is the path of external challenge and discomfort, and it's epitomized by the Socratic method.
Right, because the philosophical tradition, in really sharp contrast to the mind's automatic drive for comfort, it often deliberately begins with these disruptive emotions and moods.
It seeks them out.
States like perplexity, estrangement, or even existential anxiety. This whole tradition recognizes that these painful, jarring states are actually the necessary prerequisites for true intellectual or spiritual growth.
You see this concept throughout intellectual history. For Plato, it was wonder, that sudden, jarring recognition of the unknown, that he saw as the true horizon of metaphysical thinking.
And for someone like Kierkegaard, it was anxiety.
Exactly. He felt that anxiety was the essential catalyst that leads directly to reflection. He famously wrote that all existence makes me anxious, which suggests that profound discomfort is the gateway to understanding existence itself.
Even Heidegger found a profound lesson in existential anxiety that he said takes us beyond the average, everyday way of being.
All of these thinkers understood that to break free from comfortable convention and inherited assumptions, you need an emotional jolt.
And the intentional philosophical tool designed to leverage this very disruption is the Socratic method, or the elenchus.
Right. And it's a systematic, iterative process of questioning that is explicitly intended to inspire deep critical thinking, often for moral and philosophical inquiry.
The key word there seems to be intentional.
It is. The key here is intent. Unlike an ordinary conversation, the Socratic method intentionally produces that state of intense psychological discomfort and cognitive clash.
The state known as aporia.
Or perplexity.
Aporia is more than just being confused, though, isn't it? It's a very specific realization.
It is. It's the realization that your entire premise is internally contradictory or illogical.
It's the feeling of absolute certainty crashing headlong into a demonstrable flaw. When you experience aporia, the rug isn't just pulled out from under you.
You realize there never was a rug.
Just a gaping logical hole.
Precisely. And the purpose of generating that feeling is dual. First, it teaches conceptual knowledge, the objective understanding of a subject. But second, and I think more importantly, it teaches procedural knowledge.
How to think.
How to question, how to cross-examine, and how to support or refute a given position, relying specifically on formal rules of logic. This is why the source material emphasizes that the elenchus is the valued component in this form of education.
It's a structural tool for intellectual self-correction.
It is. The methodology I have just described tracks the original components of the Socratic method.
So if type 1 is the automatic economical shortcut, the Socratic dialogue is aimed at moving the student toward type 2 processing.
Which is deliberate, analytic, and requires conscious attention. It relies on principles of formal logic.
The goal, then, is to imprint a methodical, discerning pattern of reasoning that actively resists those quick, biased type 1 shortcuts.
This sets the stage perfectly for our central structural insight. The relationship between psychological dissonance, that instinctive need for comfort and Socratic truth-seeking, isn't just a correlation. It's governed by a principle we can call the law of disruptive resolution.
The law of disruptive resolution.
Okay, and it states, internal psychological discomfort is the necessary catalyst for true logical progress.
I think we need to slow down on this law because it completely redefines failure as fuel.
It does.
Yeah.
Dissonance creates a state of negative affect, the bad feeling that functions as measurable kinetic motivation.
You feel bad because you are inconsistent.
And that bad feeling is the driver pushing you toward doing the cognitive labor required to fix the inconsistency.
This has profound implications for communication, for persuasion.
It's a foundational finding of the source material. To persuade people, the material states, you must first cause them to experience dissonance.
Create the discomfort.
And then immediately offer your proposal as a rational, consistent way to resolve that discomfort.
The implication is pretty stark. If you present a perfectly logical argument to someone who is currently comfortable and internally consistent in their beliefs,
It will bounce right off them.
they have zero motivation to engage with it. They'll just dismiss it using selective exposure or rationalization because they're psychologically comfortable where they are.
Without a feeling of discomfort, people are simply not motivated to change. Their beliefs are working for them. This isn't just philosophical conjecture either. The science is catching up.
Oh.
Neuroscience studies confirm this link. The motivational process activated when you're resolving psychological inconsistency is localized in the left frontal cortex of the brain. You can see it as the person actively works towards a behavioral commitment to resolve the conflict.
So when we feel that mental friction of being challenged, it's not just an abstract idea. It's a physical, measurable stimulus that forces our brain to undertake cognitive labor.
Labor, which is expensive, exhausting, and slow.
Type 2 thinking.
The brain only engages that resource-intensive labor when it's under duress.
Okay, but this discomfort of dissonance, it has to be channeled correctly. This feels like the absolute crucial pivot of the entire process, where the psychology meets the philosophy.
It is. The difference between learning and merely rationalizing hinges on recognizing what you don't know and why you don't know it.
And this is where we bring Socrates back in. We need to define his profound insight. We have Socratic ignorance, SI.
Right, which is the explicit acknowledgement of a lack of knowledge in a specific field. The sources call this first-order ignorance.
First-order ignorance. So that's just knowing you don't know something.
Right, knowing you lack expertise in quantum physics or ancient Greek history. It's a productive kind of ignorance because it opens you up to learning.
And crucially, Socratic ignorance is defined without the false belief that one knows. That false belief is.
It's a second-order ignorance.
And this is the small detail Socrates famously claimed made him the wisest man in Athens. It's a bit dense, so let's revisit that central passage from the Apology, where Socrates is talking about his dialogue with the Athenian politician.
Okay. He says, of the politician, and listen closely to the structural difference here, I am wiser than this man.
For neither of us really knows anything fine and good, but this man thinks he knows something when he does not.
Whereas I, as I do not know anything, do not think I do either.
I think we need to unpack that a little more. The politician is suffering from what the sources call stubborn ignorance, STI.
And they define this as the worst kind of ignorance, believing that one knows what one really doesn't know.
So he's ignorant on two levels. He lacks the knowledge. That's first-order ignorance.
And he holds a false belief about his own competence. That's second-order ignorance.
And this type of ignorance is defined as malign. Why that word?
Because it halts the pursuit of truth. Epistemic arrogance, that pride that comes with the knowledge illusion, makes a person completely closed off to acquiring knowledge from or with others.
So if you genuinely believe you're already an expert, no amount of facts or dissonance can compel you to change.
You'll simply rationalize the incoming data away to protect your self-concept.
Okay, so stubborn ignorance is believing you're on the right path when you are completely lost and you're refusing to even look at the map.
That's a great way to put it.
And Socratic ignorance, conversely, is the simple, humble, and accurate admission. I am lost.
Which is the necessary prerequisite for starting the journey to find the map. Socratic ignorance allows your lack of knowledge not to be malign. It enables us to exploit the epistemic structure of society, to defer to genuine experts, to engage in collaborative inquiry, and to welcome correction.
Whereas stubborn ignorance, which is often just an internal mechanism to avoid the painful feeling of being wrong, prevents all of that.
It shuts the whole system down.
This distinction is what unlocks the law of disruptive resolution. Let's use that concrete visual analogy we talked about. The GPS recalculation loop. This seems to map the entire structural movement from type 1 comfort to type 2 critical thinking.
It's a perfect analogy because modern GPS technology is literally designed to create cognitive dissonance in the driver when the internal map and external reality diverge.
Okay, so let's walk through it. Step 1, the faulty belief or the initial route. This represents type 1 thinking combined with stubborn ignorance.
Right. The driver is confidently speeding down the road based on an old, familiar mental map. They're thinking, I know the way, I don't need input, I'm a good driver.
They are comfortable and cognitively consistent.
Totally. Then step 2, dissonance and disruption. This is where operative law hits.
The GPS registers a critical mismatch with reality.
The driver is supposed to be turning right in 500 feet, but they are clearly heading left onto a major highway exit ramp. The system triggers that jarring, high-alert, urgent voice.
Recalculating.
That high-stress, negative affect forces the driver's attention and engagement.
It's not a gentle suggestion. It's an urgent command designed to override their automatic processing. The disruption is necessary.
It is. Which brings us to step 3, Socratic engagement. Here, the driver has a choice.
The wise driver.
The wise driver accepts the confusion, acknowledging, wait, my internal map was wrong? That's Socratic ignorance.
They stop ignoring the input, they avoid selective exposure, and they allow the system, the elenchus, to run its iterative type 2 analysis.
It takes a few seconds, it's slow, it's deliberate. But eventually, a validated, logical new route, which is knowledge, is presented and accepted.
And stubborn ignorance in this analogy.
That's the driver who's insulted by the jarring voice, who mutes the GPS entirely, tells it to shut up, and continues to drive confidently in the wrong direction.
All based on their original failed assumption, simply because admitting they are wrong felt too uncomfortable.
The distinction is incredibly important. It means the difference between intellectual progress and self-deception boils down to how we treat the feeling of being challenged.
The wise person, the person of intellectual humility, is capable of accepting that recalculating state as a necessary, if painful, step toward arriving at the right destination.
While the stubborn person treats it as a personal insult to their competence.
So if we successfully harness that feeling of recalculating, then we're ready to engage in structured dialogue. But this process of intellectual refinement requires us to move beyond simply arguing to win.
And this is where feminist philosophical perspectives on argumentation provide a really crucial ethical counterbalance. They highlight the need to move beyond the adversarial, the competitive, or what is often termed the masculine tradition of arguing.
Which is known as heuristics. Can we define that for the listener?
Heuristics is argumentation solely as a contest. It's a debate where the goal is purely to defeat the interlocutor's claim, to score points, and to enforce one's own perceived superiority.
So if the entire goal of a conversation is just to win, it really limits the practical relevance and the knowledge-generating function of the whole exchange.
It completely undermines it. Arguments can serve so many purposes beyond just defeat for explanation, for education, for discussing matters collaboratively. When reasoners treat arguing solely as a contest, the true purpose of arguing, which is achieving shared, validated knowledge, is lost.
It becomes about the ego of the participants rather than the objective status of the truth claim.
Exactly. Conversely, the Socratic method promotes dialogue not to beat the other person, but specifically to understand their viewpoint and then to challenge their presuppositions and wrong assumptions.
With the ultimate goal of freeing both participants from wrong thinking, it's a genuinely collaborative project that's kind of disguised as a confrontation.
And to do this, you need specific character traits that are cultivated directly from Socratic ignorance. First and foremost is intellectual humility.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
It means finding a sweet spot. You have to avoid epistemic arrogance, overestimating your knowledge, but also avoid intellectual self-deprecation.
It means having the disposition to change your mind based on what others say, simply because you recognize your own fallibility, your own biases.
You know that you are driving based on a potentially faulty mental map, and you welcome an external check.
What's the second virtue?
The second is intellectual autonomy. This is the profound ability to question any belief, even your most cherished one, and to rely on your own validated logic, not just on peer pressure or tradition.
And the ultimate goal here, according to Socrates, is to be pleased to be refuted.
Yes.
I want to spend a moment on that phrase, pleased to be refuted. That is a radical ethical stance.
It is. Socrates states that The greater good is to be refuted, for there is no evil so great for someone as false opinion.
So finding out you're wrong is better than finding out the other person is wrong.
Because resolving your own false opinion, overcoming your own stubborn ignorance, is the greatest possible cognitive and moral gain you can achieve. It elevates the pursuit of truth far above the protection of ego.
So to help you, the listener, channel your inevitable moments of dissonance into this positive, knowledge-seeking cycle, we have to detail the iterative process of the elenchus, the Socratic method, as it appears in the sources.
Right. This isn't just an abstract debate tactic. It's a very disciplined form of inquiry designed to facilitate that type 2 thinking.
We can simplify it into a 5-step sequence.
We can. We can call it the 5 R's.
Mm-hmm.
Receive, reflect, refine, restate, and repeat.
Okay, step 1. Receive. This sounds simple, but it's critically challenging, especially when dissonance is high. You have to actually properly listen to the initial premise the other person is offering.
And if your level of listening is low, if you're spending all your time in your head formulating your rebuttal, the whole process fails immediately.
Because you haven't accurately received the information you're trying to analyze.
Precisely. Which brings us to step 2, reflect. You sum up the person's viewpoint and reflect it back to them.
So you're saying, what I hear you saying is...
Exactly. It involves 2 parts. Getting them to clarify their position, and then you using your own words to paraphrase it back to ensure you both agree on the statement that's under discussion. It's a classic coaching and negotiating technique.
It builds rapport. It proves you're arguing with the idea, not with the person.
Yes. Then you get to step 3, refine. This is the crucial analytical engine of the elenchus. This is the part that drills down to first principles.
And here you ask them to provide the evidence, the facts, the beliefs, or the assumptions that underpin their standpoint.
The key is to challenge the assumptions, not the conclusion. For instance, if someone says the government should regulate X because all regulation improves the economy, you don't argue about X.
You ask about the assumption.
You ask, what makes you think that all regulation universally improves the economy? And notice that framing. The sources recommend using what makes you think that instead of why.
Why that difference?
Because why often feels confrontational. It can immediately trigger defensiveness and activate those type 1 comfort-seeking responses.
That's a powerful little shift in phrasing. It moves the conversation from an accusation, why are you wrong, to genuine curiosity. Tell me the history of your thought process.
And during this refinement stage, you are actively seeking an exception, a fallacy, or a contradiction that proves the original theory wrong. It's an iterative search for the weakest foundational assumption.
Which leads to step 4, restate.
Now that the flaws have been exposed and the thinking has been refined, the internal GPS has said recalculating. You get the person to reformulate and restate their position based on the exposed flaws or their new understanding.
They have to adapt or maybe even entirely renew their wording.
And if they can't formulate a logically consistent new statement, they are in a state of productive aporia.
And it's vital that they do the work, not you. You can't just hand them the refined answer.
No, they must own the new, logically consistent belief for the change to actually stick.
Which brings us to the final step.
Step 5, repeat. This is the cyclical aspect.
Mm-hmm.
You assess the new premise they've offered and challenge any further wrong assumptions that might still be lurking underneath. The method becomes a continuous dialectic cycle, drilling down deeper and deeper.
Eventually leading to a more rigorous, logically sound conclusion, or at the very least, a clear understanding of the limits of what you currently know. That seems like a profoundly efficient, albeit challenging way to generate knowledge and to systematically correct faulty type 1 thinking. But the sources provide a dark twist here. What happens when this rigorous process, this intentional production of discomfort and aporia, is applied systematically and competitively to masses of students?
We see the high psychological cost. We see it when the elenchus is applied in modern education, particularly in law schools. The Socratic method, often adapted as the case method, is used by approximately 97% of first-year law professors in the United States.
97%. So it's the structural core of their pedagogy.
It is.
And the psychological statistics associated with this system are, well, they're frankly alarming. Law students experience severe depression rates significantly higher than the general population.
Significantly. While maybe 10 to 20% of college-aged individuals experience depression, that percentage dramatically increases to a shocking 30 to 40% during a law student's first year.
30 to 40%. That is a massive jump.
And it doesn't stabilize. The race continues to climb, reaching 40 to 50% during their second and third academic years.
And this is definitively linked to the environment.
Yes, including the competitive nature, the curriculum, and crucially, the intense systematic application of the Socratic method itself.
It suggests that while the law of disruptive resolution is necessary for learning, there is a serious psychological failure point in how that discomfort is delivered.
The essential problem here, as the sources note, is the state of aporia, that confusion or perplexity necessary for discovery.
Aporia is only productive if it's understood as temporary and instrumental.
But the source material notes that when this perplexity is induced in a competitive, high-stakes environment, it undermines a student's feelings of competency.
I can see that. Think about the typical setting.
Yeah.
A student is cold called in front of 150 of their peers and systematically shown through the elenchus that their reasoning is flawed or their premise is contradictory.
Or their knowledge is incomplete.
Instead of realizing that aporia is a productive tool, a sign of the system recalculating, they just experience humiliation and feelings of inadequacy.
They will likely falsely assume stupidity in themselves, which fuels self-defeating thought processes that align directly with the symptoms of clinical depression.
So in this institutional context, the psychological discomfort becomes chronic and debilitating rather than temporary and motivational. The environment has weaponized the very discomfort that's necessary for growth.
It has, and the consequence extends far beyond graduation. Studies show that lawyers are 3.6 times more likely to suffer from depression than those in other professions.
3.6 times. Wow.
And surveys indicate that depression and substance abuse problems follow law students right into their legal careers.
This leads to a crucial question that the data forces us to confront. Is it that people prone to depression are just drawn to the legal profession, a kind of selection bias?
Or does the legal education environment actually cause the depression? A causation argument.
And there's research on this.
One 1986 study provided compelling evidence for the latter. It showed that law students entered school with similar psychological profiles as students in other disciplines. No significant difference. But critically, once they finished with their legal education, 20 to 40% displayed some type of psychological dysfunction, significantly higher than their counterparts in other fields.
So it's the education itself that's potentially causing the harm.
It strongly suggests that the pressure to constantly restructure beliefs and justify actions cognitively, a type of permanent, stressful cognitive resolution cycle where you are always in the recalculating state without ever finding equilibrium, may fundamentally cause this psychological distress.
The pursuit of logical consistency, when institutionalized and combined with high competition and public shame, comes at a severe and measurable cost. The very system designed to train people in type 2 analytical thought inadvertently creates a debilitating amount of negative affect.
It's a profound warning. Discomfort is the necessary fuel, but too much discomfort or the wrong application of it leads to burnout and self-destruction.
Okay, so let's bring it all back together now. Let's synthesize the philosophical and the psychological insights.
True learning requires intellectual humility or Socratic ignorance, that acknowledgement that we might be wrong, in order to correctly harness the psychological engine of change, which is cognitive dissonance.
And without the ability to accept that initial discomfort, we're just doomed to stubborn ignorance.
That's the core of it.
So based on this comprehensive analysis, we have 3 key takeaways for you to consider as you navigate information and arguments in your own life.
Okay, first, the feeling of psychological discomfort when your beliefs are challenged is not a sign of weakness. It's not an indication that the challenger is wrong. It is an essential motivation for changing your beliefs.
It's the necessary catalyst for true logical progress, provided you can channel it correctly.
Second, the primary purpose of arguing should not be to win, not to engage in heuristics and just defeat the other person.
But to use the confrontation to expose the weaknesses in your own foundational assumptions and to seek a better, shared, and validated truth.
Seek to be refuted, not to refute.
And third?
And third, studies show that the rigorous, discomfort-inducing thinking taught in professional education, particularly law school, can lead to alarmingly high rates of depression.
Which suggests that seeking logical truth often comes at a high and sometimes permanent psychological cost when it's applied without psychological sensitivity.
It's a stunning body of research when you view it all together. The psychological and the philosophical are two sides of the same coin.
The discomfort drives the inquiry.
Source material suggests one final, provocative thought, one that challenges the very ideal we've been championing today.
Which ideal is that?
That absolute, relentless, critical thinking, type 2 processing, is always the highest cognitive goal.
We've spent this whole time emphasizing moving towards that deliberate, analytical type 2 processing to minimize bias and maximize truth. So how does the opposing research complicate this?
Well, research into something called the predictive dissonance model proposes a fascinating counter-evolutionary argument. It suggests that human brains may have actually evolved to selectively ignore contradictory information.
To use type 1 processing strategically?
Exactly. To prevent the overfitting of our cognitive models to local, non-generalizing conditions.
Overfitting. Can you explain that? It's a term from statistics, right?
It is. In statistical modeling, overfitting is when a model becomes so perfectly tailored to the noise and specifics of its local training data that it loses all ability to predict or generalize to new data.
The model is too perfect, but for the wrong sample.
Yes. So if your brain took every single piece of anomalous data and immediately triggered a massive, painful restructuring, a full type 2 recalculation, you would quickly overfit your cognitive model to fleeting, non-generalizing environmental noise. Your belief system would be highly unstable.
So the brain is actively protecting its larger framework from too much noisy data by simply dismissing or rationalizing small conflicts away, a kind of strategic protective ignorance.
Precisely. And if completely eliminating this protective layer of psychological comfort leads to profound distress and instability, as the law school data suggests, by showing high rates of psychological dysfunction in people trained to do nothing but relentlessly restructure their beliefs, this raises a really important question.
Which is?
Is absolute, relentless critical thinking truly the highest cognitive goal? Or is a certain degree of self-protective strategic ignorance necessary for adaptive, healthy functioning in the real world?
It leaves us to consider where the line between necessary discomfort, the fuel for growth, and profound psychological damage truly lies. A difficult question to leave with. Thank you for diving deep into the logic of discomfort with us.
A pleasure.
Until next time, keep asking the right questions, but remember to be kind to your inner GPS.
Until next time.